In life, it's about leaving this place better than I found it. I feel making a positive contribution is something that's worthy of everyone's life, and no contribution is more valuable than any other person's. What is most important is that it's a conscious contribution rather than something that just happens to one. Therefore, taking responsibility and choosing a direction for where you want things to end up and living that process is one of the most important things that anyone can do. In terms of my work at the moment, the mission of my company is to change the tone, the conversation, and the outcomes that people who fly often experience in terms of frequent flying. A bit of my background is that I've been a flight attendant for British Airways, the UK's largest airline, for the past 20 years. I've flown long haul and short haul, and I'm leaving that behind now to concentrate more on sleep, wellness, and nutrition, as I trained as a nutritional therapist in the meantime. So at the moment, I've got actually quite a few things on the go in terms of the mission. We are participating in the Some Next Sleep show that's coming up in October at the Old Truman Brewery in London. And there is a big project that's happening at the moment at Heathrow Airport Terminal 2 and 3. That's going to be an oasis for frequent flyers so that they can recharge themselves, help themselves become better travelers and therefore achieve more, which kind of dips into what you're talking about in terms of creativity. If I were to rephrase it, I would say creativity and productivity can be interchanged to a certain extent. But then again, there are people who disagree with that. But the premise is that if you travel well and arrive well, you're more likely to be more productive. You're more likely to be healthier on the road, make better decisions. And I would argue that that would lead you to be more creative, because the geopolitics of the world that we live in at the moment is such that you can take off from one location, arrive at another, and the dynamics of the challenge that you set out to solve have changed, and therefore you need to bring creativity to the solutions that you offer. Otherwise, you get left in the dust again. Well, on a very basic level, if one were to look at the dynamics of what a good night's sleep consists of, you have REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And while it's important to get a fair balance of all of those different types of sleep, REM sleep specifically is the sleep which is related to being able to digest what's happened during the day at rest and play with it in our dreams, as it were, and come up with solutions that can empower us, or at least enable us to assimilate those occurrences. So at a basic level, if people are looking at the quality of their sleep, how much REM sleep they're getting, that's always a good starting place. Unfortunately, because sleep is wildly underestimated, people don't tend to factor that into the way they live. And what tends to happen is they show up having been deprived of sleep and have it show up in ways they wouldn't like it to show up in other areas of their life that prompt them to come and seek out the expertise and the help of someone like myself. So it becomes a matter of helping people understand that there are no ways to cut corners when it comes to sleep, that it's vital. It's not an aside. It's not something that you fit in. Some of the most productive people that I know and have heard of prioritize sleep because it's that important. And they've shown the benefits of taking that approach, as opposed to it being retroactively included in a schedule. Research is also showing that some of the people who are more creative tend to prioritize sleep, so much so, in fact, one of the examples that comes to mind is the most decorated Olympian of all time, Michael Phelps. He would go and train in a pool for hours on end. We're talking about 6-hour days with a very good coach who was able to hone in, and he would sleep 8 hours a night, but then he would have a 3-hour nap. And he would do things like, if the competition were training 6 days a week, because he believes in incremental progress, he would train 7 days a week. And you think, well, how is that possible? It's because of things like the quality of the sleep he's able to get, the recuperation he was able to get. And he dedicated himself solely to that. And his medal tally at the Olympics and the moniker that he has as being the most decorated Olympian of all time go to show that there is a way to do that. Some people would say, I don't have the capacity or the time to do that. Well, others might say, how committed are you to the goal that you want to achieve? Besides that, you don't necessarily have to go to that kind of extreme if you don't have a goal that pulls you in that kind of direction. But there are ways of working with the dynamics of sleep as it is that are more effective to help you manifest the kind of REM sleep you like, the kind of deep sleep you like, which is very restorative physically, that people can play with and use in their own circumstances to help them get results. So quite specifically, it's about education, about realigning one's life according to that important aspect that allows one to perform well by looking after the kind of emphasis, importance they place on their sleep.
That's so interesting, Chris. And as you were, giving those examples, it reminded me that I've read some research, I don't know too much about it, but they say that there's a link between people who exercise a lot and productivity, whereas people who are highly creative tend to not exercise as much. So I thought of this difference between productivity and creativity, that people who go to the gym in the morning, they sleep 4 hours a night, they may be more productive, but maybe not as creative. What are your thoughts on that?
Thinking. I think I would argue for the former, in as much as that. I mean, it depends how. I really wish I knew the correct. I really wish I knew the correct pronunciation of the gentleman I'm about to quote's name. So forgive me, but I was told the story of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi,
yeah.
Exactly. Where he approaches, is it Paul Drucker, and asks him to allow Mihenchi to observe how he works in order to be effective. And Paul Drucker says he doesn't believe in creativity. Paul Drucker doesn't believe in creativity because he believes that if you keep your nose to the grindstone, you can form habits and routines that allow productivity, but he doesn't necessarily correlate that to being creative. So I think the jury is out on that. My own personal experience is I would language my own personal experience in the idea that we create our own luck. And luck can be something, to some people, it's something that comes out of left field and it's just something that happens. But also I feel there's an argument to be made that luck is what arrives when you consistently put yourself in the way for it to happen. And that is what I would call being productive.
Okay. Yeah. Was it a conversation between Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and Peter Drucker?
It was indeed.
Peter Drucker. I think I remember reading the same.
The author of The Effective Executive. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, Peter Drucker was indeed a highly productive person, and I think Mihai Csikszentmihalyi asked him for an interview, and he refused because he was so busy being productive.
Productive.
Yeah.
Indeed. So I don't know. Was Paul Drucker productive?
Peter Drucker, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, Peter. Excuse me. Was he ultimately creative? I think you could argue that, even though he didn't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think his starting position was, if you were productive, maybe something creative can come of that. So is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, because it's in order to be creative, we do have to be highly productive, because you know, not all ideas that we come up with are valuable, and not everything we do is useful. So it's this kind of, we only hear about the success stories. We tend not to hear about the thousands of things that that person did before they hit, you know, the nail on the head, and became an overnight success, as it were.
Yeah, yeah, I could agree with that. You are what you eat is not a throwaway maxim. It's very real. The ability to fire off neurons and the whole biochemistry of how you remain sane, productive, creative, has a real basis in nutrition because of the type of nutrients that we feed ourselves. Paying attention to the types of diets that we consume on a consistent and regular basis is crucial, is important, especially in the age where we're learning of dementia, Alzheimer's, and, you know, degenerative diseases on the whole. When it comes to the biochemistry of food, and the firing of neurons quite specifically, the way that we need constant fuel in order to have these things show up for us. A saying that comes to mind is, if you want to see how tall a building can become, is see how deep the foundations are being dug. When it comes to what we put in, this also applies in this respect, what we put into our bodies, because the quality of the food that we have is going to manifest the intellect, it's going to manifest the ability, the thinking power that we use to create or to produce the creativity that we're talking about. And in fact, I think it's Ayurveda talks, the Indian tradition of Ayurveda talks specifically about the qualities of food and how you take something that's gross in context, I guess, and it becomes like rasa, I believe is the term used, and it's that fineness. So the quality of the food that we put into our bodies determines the amount of fineness that we can manifest. So, you know, the science of Ayurveda has figured it out for that time, and there are other traditions around the world that have similar points of view and effects. But I guess because we're in the West, we are bombarded with advertisers' dollars, and we're told that, you know, this is good because it's in a red plastic container and it's shiny and they're shouting the loudest. So we tend to miss this idea that what you really ingest can help you. When it comes to brain power and things of that nature, there are herbs, there's nutrition quite specific that will help people, but again, one's biochemistry has a predetermination. So if I were to borrow again from the Ayurvedic body of knowledge, I'm typically a kapha type person. So I'm naturally more considered and slower in my thought processes, whereas my partner is vata, and she's quick firing all the time. You know, the requirements to get the best out of her might not necessarily be the same requirements to get the best out of me. There are certain things that we would have in common and we'd be able to use, but at the same time, understanding who we're trying to work with and their natural predisposition is always a good starting point to help people understand what they need to start looking at beyond the general things that everyone can do to help themselves.
Okay, excellent, Chris. Lots of words of wisdom, and I think it's so important to remember, you know, the basics that, you know, as you say, what we eat is what we are, and not a lot of people relate creativity with the food we eat. You know, the food we eat determines the quality of our thoughts, and the quality of our thoughts will lead to our actions.
And again, you saying that again reminds me of the, and you, I think you probably know it better than I do, but one of my understandings of the Indian caste system, with the Brahmins eating a certain way, and, you know, the other castes eating a different way, because it was partitioned. This is the role they played in society. So they needed to have sattvic food, which is the purest type of food, whereas others had to go out and be the warriors, so they needed to eat the rajasic food, and and so on and so forth. These are all valuable tools for us to find our own way to make sure that we are able to operate at our best. And the more we take those understandings that have been handed down and fit it to the time we're in and the challenges that we face now, the better we'll be able to navigate over time the ability to create more consciously and better results that we would like to share with us, with our world, and leave behind.